At precisely 0500 hours, Maya Ellison stepped onto the hangar floor at Ridgefield Air Base, her steel-toed boots echoing against decades-old concrete. The pre-dawn air was sharp, laced with jet fuel and machine grease, familiar and unforgiving. Her auburn hair was tied back in a regulation bun she no longer had to wear, but chose to anyway. Some habits, like some wounds, never truly left you. Around her, the maintenance crew moved like clockwork, laughing, cursing, moving parts, inspecting instruments. To them, she was just Ellison, the quiet one. The professor. The mechanic who didn't talk much, but always had the answers no one else could find. No one knew she had once been someone else. 8 years earlier, Maya Ellison had been Captain Julia Reed's squadron leader, combat pilot, decorated veteran. Now she was a ghost. Her green eyes no longer met anyone's too long. Her quarters were a converted shipping container, tucked between a fuel depot and 2 rusting storage tanks. No one questioned it. No one cared to ask. But every morning, without fail, Maya ran the base perimeter before the sun rose. For miles in silence. Same path, same thoughts. 4 names etched in memory. Men who had trusted her, followed her, and died in an ambush they were never meant to survive. The official story blamed her. Reckless command. Ignored intel. She had been court-martialed and stripped of her rank, her wings, and her name. Only one man, General Alaric Monroe, had believed in her innocence. But he had been transferred out of country before he could testify. And the man who betrayed her, Colonel Everett Langston, retired with honors. Maya had disappeared into the maintenance crews that kept aircraft flying but never asked questions. She had legally changed her identity, bleached her hair, and let time cover her tracks like dust on unused runways. But some ghosts don't stay buried. She kept only 3 items beneath her cot in the container. A tarnished squadron badge with 4 stars, a photo of herself in flight gear beside her old F-22, and a letter from Lieutenant Aaron Torres, written the night before he died. Captain, whatever happens out there, I trust you. We all do. You're the best we've ever flown with. See you on the other side. That letter never stopped burning in her hands. As she finished her inspection of a Griffin the 10th 9's engine housing that morning, Senior Master Sergeant Theo Walker approached. His expression was unreadable, his tone all business. Ellison, we're short on train techs for the Desert Storm 3 exercise next week. You're being reassigned to the Falcon hangar. Maya's hand froze on the wrench. The Falcon X-9 was the Air Force's newest hybrid. Part jet, part rotor, all innovation. She knew every spec by heart, every manual, every circuit diagram. She had memorized them in secret long past midnight. Understood, Sergeant, she replied evenly, masking the flicker of anticipation that punched through her chest. Walker raised an eyebrow. You're unusually prepared. Most techs avoid that bird. Maya only shrugged. I like to stay current. You never know when knowledge might come in handy. He studied her for a second longer, then nodded and walked off. What she did not say, could not say, was that the Griffin the 10th 9 was as close to the sky as she would ever be again. And even if she could never fly, she would understand it better than the men who did. As the morning wore on, Maya began the first of many system checks on Falcon Alpha 1. The aircraft gleamed under the hangar lights, its profile lean and predatory. Watching from across the floor, a group of pilots chatted and laughed. Among them, Captain Cole Maddox, the designated flight lead for the upcoming exercise. She had seen his type before. Charismatic, confident, the kind of man who believed the cockpit was his birthright. Rumor said his father sat on the Senate Armed Services Committee. The kind of connection that made screw-ups vanish from personnel records. As Maya climbed up onto the platform beside the cockpit, her hands moved with muscle memory, so ingrained it bordered on spiritual. The instrument panel lit up under her inspection. Her eyes scanned without thinking. Her fingers traced systems she had not touched since she was someone else. Behind her, Maddox's voice rang out. Hey, sweetheart, make sure you don't press anything you don't understand. She didn't turn. She didn't flinch. Just finishing the diagnostics, she said calmly. Be done in 2 minutes. Make it 1, Maddox replied. loud enough for the other pilots to hear. These birds are for real pilots now. Laughter followed. Maya descended the ladder in silence, her jaw tight. Walker saw it from across the bay. He walked toward her, his voice low. "You don't have to take that, Ellison." "It's fine," she said, but something inside her had cracked. Later that afternoon, Major Riley Cross, the only female pilot in the exercise roster, approached her quietly near the fuel pump. "I saw what Maddox did. He's good, but not as good as he thinks. Guys like him crack when they finally meet someone who doesn't play by their rules." Maya glanced at her. "And what do you suggest?" Cross smiled faintly. "Just be ready. His ego's about to write a check reality can't cash." As the sun dipped behind the hangars and the floodlights flickered on, Maya walked back toward her container. Her steps were steady, her hands calloused and stained from engine oil. But inside her chest, something dangerous had begun to stir. Tomorrow, the first hooks would be set, and the ghost in coveralls was about to step back into the light. The Desert Storm 3 briefing room pulsed with energy, testosterone, rivalry, caffeine, and the buzz of egos bouncing off steel walls. Pilots from 5 major bases had gathered, their uniforms crisp, their grins sharp. Every glance was a contest. Every laugh was a jab. Maya stood at the back wall, wearing her grease-stained coveralls like armor. Clipboard in hand, she blended in with the janitors, the techs, the ignored. No one noticed her. No one looked twice, except Captain Cole Maddox. He stood at the front like a man giving a TED Talk instead of a mission briefing. Confident, smirking. His Harvard diction oozed casual arrogance. And when he spoke, the air changed. "Gentlemen," he said, then turned to nod at the only woman among them, "and lady, this week we prove why we fly, and others will fix things." Laughter followed, the sound as smooth and practiced as a drill formation. Maya's fingers tightened on the clipboard. Across the room, Major Riley Cross met her eyes for just a second. The look said it all. He's not done yet. Later that afternoon, Maya began her inspection on Falcon Alpha 7, the aircraft Maddox would fly. The Griffin variant shimmered under the lights, its twin hybrid turbines gleaming, its avionics baked tighter than any she'd seen. She climbed into the cockpit without hesitation, her hands moving over the controls like a pianist returning to an old melody. She adjusted the seat, flipped the power relay, checked the hydraulic pressure, all of it muscle memory carved in a bone. "Excuse me, sweetheart." Maddox's voice. "I need to do my pre-flight. Can we wrap up your little checklist?" Maya glanced up, meeting his eyes. "For 1 second. Final systems check, sir. 90 seconds. Make it 60. These controls aren't crayons and coloring books. This is real pilot work." She didn't respond. She didn't need to. But he wasn't done. As she climbed down from the cockpit, he added, loud enough for the crowd nearby, "Try not to break anything on your way out, honey. These birds cost more than your entire life." More laughter. And this time, Maya felt something she hadn't in years. Not pain, not shame, anger. That evening, Senior Master Sergeant Theo Walker pulled her aside. His jaw was clenched, his voice tight. "You want me to file a report?" "No. He humiliated you in front of half the air wing. I've been through worse." Walker looked at her for a long moment. "I don't know who you were before you came here, Ellison, but I know what you are now. You're better than this place lets you be." Maya nodded once, then returned to her quarters. Inside the shipping container, she sat on the floor and opened the small metal box beneath her cot. The squadron badge still gleamed beneath layers of wear. The photograph of a younger woman beside a fighter jet stared back at her like a stranger. She unfolded the old letter from Lieutenant Aaron Torres. "Whatever happens out there, I trust you. You're the best pilot any of us have ever flown with." She refolded the letter slowly. She was still that woman. She had just buried the uniform under too many layers of silence. At 0400 the next morning, Maddox called a surprise meeting with the command staff. The excuse was an operations adjustment. The real goal was attention. Colonel Grant Ellison, base commander, rubbed his temples. "We're 3 pilots down. Food poisoning at the cantina. The VIP flybys in 72 hours, and half the roster is in the infirmary." Maddox leaned back in his chair, smile casual. I have a suggestion. Since our mechanics seem so interested in what we do, maybe we give them a taste of the cockpit. Let them see what real piloting involves. The room went quiet. Major Cross raised an eyebrow. You're serious? Absolutely, Maddox replied. Let one of them sit in the Falcon during a ground run. 5 minutes. Engine startup. No liftoff. Just education. Besides, we could use the footage for crew resource training. Colonel Ellison looked skeptical. Liability would be. She'll sign waivers. Maddox cut in. No risk. Just a mechanic pushing a few buttons. Harmless. Who do you have in mind? Maddox turned slowly, deliberately. Ellison, the quiet one. Seems to think she knows these birds inside and out. Let's see what she knows from the other side of the glass. Major Cross didn't smile, but her silence spoke volumes. The order was given, and that afternoon, as word spread through the base like wildfire, the entire hangar transformed into a stage. Dozens of airmen, engineers, and even low-ranking officers found reasons to wander near the Falcon's pad. Phones were ready. Grins were wide. The show was about to begin. Maya stood beside the aircraft, wearing a borrowed training flight suit. Baggy, stained, a deliberate mockery of the real thing. The helmet she was issued had a cracked visor and no comms. She said nothing. She climbed the ladder slowly, the heat pressing in around her. Each rung felt like the weight of years. And then she sat in the cockpit, and everything came rushing back. Every gauge, every switch, every vibration through the seat, every sound of a turbine cycling through startup. She closed her eyes for half a second. Captain Julia Reeds exhaled. Major Cross watched from a distance, arms crossed, heart pounding. Beside her, a junior pilot whispered, "She's trembling." "No," Cross murmured. "She's restraining herself." From the tarmac, Maddox barked up at her. "Don't touch anything you don't understand. Ellison, this isn't a simulator. You're not reading a manual now." Maya's fingers hovered over the starter sequence, and then they moved. Precisely, deliberately, professionally. The Falcon's twin turbines roared to life with a syncopated hum of calibrated perfection. The startup checklist, a process that typically took 3 minutes for a trained pilot, was completed in under 90 seconds, with 0 errors. Inside the command bunker, one of the senior instructors leaned forward over the radio. Falcon Alpha 7, this is Ridgefield Tower. We're not seeing any deviation. System response is flawless." On the ground, the laughter began to die, replaced by murmurs. Phones still recorded, but faces were changing. Confusion, then awe. Colonel Ellison's voice crackled through the command channel. "Who authorized engine ignition?" "Maddox." "I didn't." Maddox's voice cracked. She's not cleared for anything above a cold start." But Maya had already moved past protocol. Her fingers danced across the flight stick, flipping the Falcon into full systems mode. The digital HUD glowed green. Avionics sang in perfect harmony. She hadn't just started the bird. She had awakened it. General Monroe, watching from a remote ops feed, stood slowly from his desk 100 miles away and whispered one word. "Reeds." The ghost in the coveralls had stepped into the light, and the world would never look at her the same again. Silence fell across Ridgefield Air Base like a blackout curtain. The Falcon's twin rotors wound into a steady hum, their rhythm as exact as a metronome. The crowd that had gathered to laugh stood frozen. What had begun as a humiliation stunt had transformed into a performance no one could explain. No stumbles, no second attempts, just surgical execution, reflexive, professional, deliberate. Inside the cockpit, Maya's breathing was calm. Her hands moved as if they had never left the sky. With the HUD stabilized, she engaged systems one by one. Engine response calibration, avionics sync, turbine thermal readout, and terrain sensor sweeps. Each confirmation tone rang like a bell in a cathedral of silence. The crowd, once ready with jokes and camera phones, now stared like witnesses to something sacred. From the bunker, Senior Systems Officer Delaney watched the live telemetry feed with furrowed brows. There's no way a Level 2 tech is doing that. Across from him, Major Riley Cross leaned in, her voice level. "She's not a tech. Not really. At 5,000 feet in the control tower, a young airman named Carson turned to his supervisor, pale. She just ran the advanced combat sequence diagnostic. No tech even knows that menu exists. Then, from the airstrip below, Maddox shouted through the comms with a voice cracking under pressure. Davis, shut down now. You're violating live aircraft protocols. This is not a drill. But Maya didn't hear him. Her helmet had no active comms. By design. Instead, her hand moved slowly to the cyclic stick, fingers resting gently. For a breath, her eyes closed, and then she opened the throttle. The Falcon rose vertically in a clean, seamless lift, climbing 30 feet into the air like it was being pulled upward by invisible wires. Her balance adjustments were nearly invisible. Minor micro-corrections even seasoned pilots missed under pressure. A gasp rolled through the crowd as the Falcon transitioned smoothly from hover to forward motion, slipping into jet mode with a fluidity that belied the aircraft's hybrid nature. "What is she doing?" shouted Maddox, turning to the control bunker. "She's not cleared to lift off." Delaney didn't answer. He was staring at the telemetry in disbelief. "Sir, she's flying the Falcon better than any of you." 15 miles away, General Alaric Monroe stood in a remote command center, a live feed of the Falcon in front of him. The camera caught the aircraft banking through simulated mountain terrain in perfect terrain-following flight. He didn't blink. Behind him, an aide entered. "Sir, Ridgefield's tower is requesting permission to override her controls. Emergency protocol. Colonel Ellison is asking for immediate ground authority." Monroe didn't turn. "Deny the override." "Sir, she knows what she's doing, but she's not even." "Dismissed," Monroe said quietly. "That woman is Captain Julia Reeds." Down below, Maya pushed the Falcon into a hammerhead turn. The aircraft spun on its axis in midair, pivoted with precision, and dropped back into level flight. The telemetry confirmed a maneuver that had never been completed under live field conditions. Maya's lips parted just slightly, the corners of her mouth tugging upward, not in joy, but in recognition. Her body remembered. Her mind remembered. She wasn't flying by control. She was flying by instinct. Back at the airfield, Major Cross pushed through the stunned crowd toward Colonel Ellison. Her voice cut like steel. "You need to stop this now." "She's gone rogue," Ellison barked. "I'm about to authorize emergency shoot-down protocols." "You do that," Cross replied coolly, "and you'll shoot down the only person on this base who actually knows how to fly that aircraft like it was meant to be flown." Ellison turned, furious. "She's a mechanic. A level 2 maintenance tech with no clearance. She shouldn't even be in the cockpit." Cross stepped closer, her voice lower, sharper. "She's not a tech. She's Captain Julia Reeds, the youngest combat squadron leader in modern Air Force history. The one Langston threw under the bus during Operation Silent Vortex." Ellison's face drained of color. "That's impossible." Reeds disappeared. "No," Cross said. "She adapted." In the sky, Maya banked low over the ridge, eyes locked on a simulated distress beacon blinking in her HUD. It was a mock mission objective: rescue a downed pilot in hostile terrain. The kind of thing Maddox had fumbled in practice runs. She reached the beacon in 4 minutes. Half the average time. A simulated SAM launcher activated. Warning alarms sounded. Maya didn't flinch. She dipped onto the radar envelope, skimming tree lines and breaking missile locks with terrain masking. Every movement was anticipatory. Every decision born of experience, not theory. In the bunker, Delaney stared at the monitors. "She's not dodging those systems. She's reading them. She knows how they think. She designed the training logic," Cross said quietly. "She wrote the maneuvers for that mission profile 8 years ago." "She what?" Cross stepped away, already pulling out her phone. "She needs airspace, not interference." Back in the sky, Maya dropped into a canyon no pilot had ever dared during drills. Walls pressed close on either side. A single misjudgment would shatter the Falcon like glass. But she rode the air like it was alive, steering with touch, not force. At the mouth of the canyon, she slowed, hovering with a precision that should not have been possible. The simulated rescue was complete. Then she banked hard, rose vertically, and pushed the Falcon into its top-speed run back toward base. Telemetry registered a record-breaking return. Flight time, 23 minutes from launch to mission completion. 8 minutes faster than the base record, and done by a ghost in a borrowed flight suit. She landed the Falcon on the exact pad she had launched from. The wheels touched down with the softness of a feather. Maya powered down the systems one by one, her movements controlled, precise. Then she opened the canopy. The crowd didn't move. No one spoke. Even Maddox stood in stunned silence, his face drained of color, his hands curled into fists. Maya climbed down the ladder, removed the cracked helmet, and set it beside the aircraft. Her flight suit still hung wrong, still sagged at the knees and arms, still bore the stain of disrespect. But the woman wearing it walked with fire in her bones. She passed Maddox without looking. Major Cross stepped forward. "You just destroyed every record in this airframe." Maya met her gaze. Her voice was low even. "I didn't do it for records." Before Cross could respond, a line of black SUVs pulled up at the edge of the hangar. Military police, 2-star security detail, and one black vehicle with a 3-star flag. Doors opened. General Alaric Monroe stepped out. The crowd snapped to attention, but his eyes didn't scan the group. They locked on one person. "Maya Ellison is not who you think she is," he said, his voice carrying like thunder. "She's Captain Julia Reed's." The sound of 100 breaths being held filled the air. And for the first time in years, Maya stood straight, looked a superior officer in the eye, and delivered a perfect salute. "Sir." The air on Ridgefield's tarmac turned electric. General Alaric Monroe's presence had silenced even the most jaded officers. As he stepped toward the Falcon, the tension cracked like glass under pressure. Beside him, 2 uniformed aides flanked a secure case stamped with the seal of the Department of Defense. Colonel Ellison moved to intercept. "General, I wasn't made aware of this visit." Monroe didn't stop walking. His tone was ice-cold. "You weren't supposed to be." Ellison froze mid-step, his mouth opening, then closing again. Maya, Julia, stood unmoving, hands at her sides, shoulders back. She hadn't stood like this in years. It felt foreign and familiar all at once. General Monroe stopped in front of her. His face was older now, his hair grayer, but the eyes were the same, clear, calculating, and filled with a weight only those in command carried. "Captain Julia Reed's," he said, loud enough for everyone to hear. "By the authority granted to me under Title 10 of the United States Code and under direct authorization from the Office of the Secretary of the Air Force, your name, record, and service have been restored, effective immediately." He turned to one of the aides. The man opened the secure case and removed a polished black folder. Monroe continued, voice unwavering. "This document includes orders for reinstatement, promotion to major, and retroactive back pay. You are hereby offered command of the Falcon Test and Evaluation Squadron at your discretion." Gasps broke out in the watching crowd. Captain Cole Maddox took a slow step backward, face pale, eyes darting like a man trying to escape through his own thoughts. Colonel Ellison found his voice. "Sir, this is highly irregular. This woman disappeared. She never filed appeals. She falsified her identity. There are protocols." "There are protocols," Monroe interrupted, "and every one of them failed her." He turned to face the assembled command staff. 8 years ago, Colonel Everett Langston orchestrated a treasonous cover-up. Operation Silent Vortex wasn't compromised because of Reed's failure. It was sabotaged. 4 pilots died, and Langston sold mission intelligence to hostile forces. Reed's was made the scapegoat. Silence spread like smoke across the field. Not even a whisper broke through. Langston's confession, written 3 days before his death, was sealed and buried under classified security layers, Monroe continued. But in light of recent testimony and the events we just witnessed, those documents have been released. And what they show is damning. He faced Maya again. "You endured exile to protect the truth. Now, it's time others answer for the lies." At that moment, Major Cross stepped forward, lips tight, eyes fixed on Ellison. "Sir, I formally request an internal review of command climate on Ridgefield Air Base. I'm submitting a report of discrimination, unsafe leadership conduct, and targeted harassment by Captain Maddox and others under Ellison's command. Monroe nodded once. It's already in motion. Behind them, Maddox stepped forward, his voice shaking. She lied to everyone. She let us believe she was a tech. She deceived the entire base. Monroe looked at him with open contempt. She survived a court-martial, a media storm, and 72 hours of enemy torture while extracting 2 wounded pilots. You mocked her in front of your peers, humiliated her publicly, and tried to set her up for failure on government equipment. And she still outperformed every pilot here, including you. Captain Maddox, Monroe said, voice tightening, you are suspended from flight status pending a full investigation. Maddox's jaw clenched. He turned, looking for support, only to find faces turned away. There was nowhere to hide. That evening, the base was on lockdown. Command staff scrambled to contain the fallout. Phones were confiscated. Uploaded videos were tracked, though by then it was too late. Maya's flawless flight was already viral. News feeds lit up with headlines like wildfire. The mechanic who flew. Air Force hero returned from exile. The pilot they erased. And at the center of the storm, Maya sat alone in her quarters, the same metal box in front of her. The photo was no longer just a memory. It was an anchor. The squadron badge sat beside it, polished now. The letter from Aaron Torres remained folded, its edges worn. Outside her door, there was a knock. Major Riley Cross entered. She didn't ask permission. She just walked in and sat on the edge of the metal bunk. You destroyed him today, she said, not unkindly. Maddox, Ellison, the hierarchy, everything. Maya stared at the badge in her hand. I didn't want to destroy anything. I just wanted to fly. Cross studied her for a long moment. You could take the promotion. Build the next generation of Falcon squadrons. Train new pilots. Hell, you could be the face of the Air Force's redemption tour. I don't want redemption, Maya said quietly. Cross didn't respond right away. Then she reached into her flight jacket and removed a manila folder. Found this buried in the exercise archive. Maddox requested your Falcon be fitted with a faulty coolant node. Said it would make the flight more dramatic. You were set up. Maya took the folder and flipped through the documents. Her hands were steady. He tried to make me crash. Cross stood. He tried. And you turned it into the best performance this base has seen in decades. As Cross left, she paused at the door. You have a truth now, Julia. All of it. What you do with it next. That's yours to choose. Maya said nothing. She stared down at the old flight photo one more time. She saw the confident eyes of her younger self. The one who still believed that skill mattered more than politics. That integrity would be rewarded. She wasn't that woman anymore. She was something stronger. Outside in the training hangar, Amanda Rodriguez, barely 22, just out of technical school, stood beside Falcon Alpha 7, eyes wide, voice hushed as she whispered to one of the ground crew. She was one of us, and they tried to bury her. She didn't know Maya stood behind her, listening. Maya didn't interrupt. She simply walked past the Falcon, past the hangar, and into the cold night. The stars above shimmered in a sky that no longer seemed unreachable. And for the first time in years, Captain Julia Reeds began to plan not how to fly again, but how to build something no one could ever tear down. By morning, Ridgefield was no longer just an airbase. It was a fault line. Within 12 hours, the video of Maya's flight, formerly known as Ellison the Mechanic, had accumulated over 3.2 million views. Military forums lit up with arguments. News anchors speculated about conspiracies. Retired veterans filled the comment sections with fury, support, and disbelief. And across the global defense community, one name returned to prominence with force. Captain Julia Reeds. At the Pentagon, entire departments were called into emergency briefings. The Secretary of the Air Force issued a preliminary statement acknowledging an incident involving misidentification of personnel at a secure base. But the damage was done, and growing. At Ridgefield, Colonel Grant Ellison was suspended pending an internal review. Captain Cole Maddox had disappeared into administrative hold, pending a court-martial recommendation. Major Cross, now acting head of the Falcon Flight Operations Team, took control of the base's highest-value aircraft while juggling media blackouts, legal interviews, and a growing stream of internal whistleblowers emboldened by Maya's return. And Maya? She requested to be transferred to an empty hangar. It was granted without question. The hangar was cold, cavernous, quiet, exactly what she needed. It was there, amid crates of outdated navigation gear and decommissioned engine modules, that Maya began planning. Not for revenge, not for reinstatement, but for something more enduring. She sketched out a new training framework on a whiteboard she dragged in from storage. At first, it was simple: how to train Falcon pilots for real-world adaptive flying, fighting against systems instead of inside them. But as she wrote, it evolved. She added modules for mechanical integration, terrain masking, even human psychology under pressure. By the third day, it looked like a new doctrine, but she didn't want to teach it at Ridgefield. She wanted to take it somewhere else. Build it somewhere no one could override her voice again. Meanwhile, Amanda Rodriguez hadn't stopped talking about the flight. Or Maya. Her voice became the unofficial pulse of the enlisted ranks. Mechanics who had worked beside Ellison for years now walked the halls in stunned reflection, realizing they had spent years next to someone who had once commanded combat squadrons. But Amanda wasn't interested in the gossip. She wanted to learn. So when she knocked on Maya's hangar door, it wasn't with awe. It was with a notepad. "I want to know everything you know about Falcon pressure calibration," she said. Maya looked up from her diagrams. "You'll find it in the tech manuals." "No," Amanda replied. "I want to know what you know, not what the book says." A long silence passed between them. Maya set her marker down. "Close the door behind you." Elsewhere on the base, Major Cross fielded her third classified inquiry in 2 hours. One from the Joint Training Command, another from the Inspector General's office, and the most recent from the Senate Armed Services Committee. They all asked the same question in different forms. How did this happen? How did a court-martialed war hero disappear into a hangar and become a ghost with a wrench? How did every level of command miss it? And why did no one stop it? Cross gave the same answer each time. "You told the world we didn't need her. She believed you." That evening, General Monroe returned. He requested no ceremony, no base-wide briefing. He simply walked to Maya's hangar, clipboard in hand, and stood silently in the doorway as she instructed Amanda on Falcon torque variants. Amanda stepped back, recognizing the gravity of the man's presence, and excused herself. Monroe walked in slowly, surveying the scribbled white bards. "You're designing a program," he said, not asking. "I'm designing a system that doesn't bury good people under bad politics," Maya replied. He looked around. "This isn't a base classroom. I don't want it to be. I want to build this somewhere else, where mechanics become pilots, where flight school dropouts get second chances, where people like Amanda never have to crawl their way past people like Maddox just to be seen." Monroe studied her. "And what do you need?" "An airfield. Quiet, unrestricted, and out of reach from anyone who wears a star and doesn't understand what a wrench really means." Monroe smiled faintly. "You know there will be people who think you're walking away again." "I'm not walking away," Maya said. "I'm walking forward. They just never imagined those directions could be different." He nodded once. "I have a location. Montana. Cold. Remote. Beautiful. Decommissioned after the last drawdown. I can pull some strings, get you the keys. But you'll have to name it." Maya looked around at her makeshift classroom. She didn't need time to think. "The Hawthorne Flight Academy," she said. Monroe blinked. Hawthorne, Torres, Carter, Bell, Michaels, the 4 men who had died under her command. She raised her eyes. "I fly for them now." By sunrise, the decision was sealed. The next chapter of Maya's life wouldn't be a comeback. It would be a blueprint. Amanda would go with her. Cross would send candidates. Monroe would make sure the Air Force didn't interfere. And Maya? She would teach others not just how to fly, but how to navigate a world that tried to erase them. Because for every Julia Reeds they buried, there were 1,000 Amanda Rodriguez's waiting to rise. Snow crunched beneath Maya's boots as she stepped onto the forgotten tarmac of Whitetail Airfield, nestled deep in Montana's northern spine. The wind stung her cheeks, sharp and clean. The horizon stretched wide and silent, broken only by the jagged shadows of distant mountains and the dark skeletons of old hangars. weathered, stripped, and waiting. It was perfect. The decommissioned field had once trained bomber crews during the Cold War. Now it was hers. There was no sign, no guards, no radar towers humming overhead. Just acres of frozen opportunity. General Monroe had come through. The paperwork had cleared in a matter of days. The land had been signed over through an education and veteran transition grant buried so deep in the defense budget it barely existed on paper. But it was real now, and it belonged to her. Beside her, Amanda Rodriguez stared at the windswept space like it was the surface of the moon. "There's no plumbing," she said. Maya smiled faintly. "There's no politics either." They walked the flight line in silence, passing hangars with rusted doors and peeling numbers. In one of them, a single surviving trainer aircraft sat under a tarp. Maya ran her fingers along its side. Flaking paint, cold metal, engine cowlings torn open and half repaired. She turned to Amanda. "Think you can get her running?" Amanda grinned. "Give me a week. You have 3 days." "Now you're starting to sound like Maddox." Maya's smile faded. "Let's never say that name here." Within a week, shipments began arriving. Used hydraulic lifts, donated simulator consoles, cold weather generators, stackable bunks, a 3D printed flight desk system salvaged from a canceled DARPA program, a satellite internet dish courtesy of Monroe's personal favor to a friend at Space Command. The Hawthorne Flight Academy wasn't just forming. It was materializing like a myth returning from exile. And it started drawing attention. Not from the public. Not yet. But from those who had followed Maya's story quietly, who had been waiting for a place that didn't measure worth by rank, clearance level, or flight school pedigree. Within the first month, 23 applications arrived. 10 were from veterans who had been discharged for non-combat injuries. 7 were from women who had passed technical exams, but had been told, off the record, that they lacked fighter temperament. 2 came from former enlisted techs with years of aircraft knowledge and 0 flight hours. 1 came from a former drone pilot discharged after exposing contract fraud. And 3 came anonymously. Names redacted, service records missing, but the language in their letters told Maya everything she needed to know. They had been her once. Meanwhile, the Air Force began its quiet reckoning. Ridgefield command structure collapsed under review. Colonel Ellison was reassigned to a remote logistics post in Alaska. Captain Maddox was dishonorably discharged. The final report, though not public, stated a systemic failure of judgment, ethics, and leadership. But that wasn't the part that made headlines. What caught fire was the clip, the one showing Maya lifting off in Falcon Alpha 7, the camera angle low, the sunrise catching her face through the canopy, and the words from an unknown spectator whispering just off-screen. "She's not flying it. She's owning it." Those 5 words went viral again. Hashtags exploded. Hashtag own the sky. Hashtag fly your own course. Hashtag Captain Reeds. Hashtag Hawthorne Academy. The military tried to contain it, but the story had moved beyond them now. It belonged to everyone who had been silenced. Back at Whitetail, Maya took her first student into the air. Carlos Martinez, a former Army mechanic who had never passed a single Air Force entrance screening, climbed into the left seat of the restored trainer with trembling hands. "This is different," he muttered. "Simulators don't feel like this." "That's the point," Maya said. "Flying isn't digital. It's personal." They rose into the Montana sky on a wind so crisp it sang against the fuselage. Carlos flew with uncertainty at first, corrections too sharp, eyes darting across gauges. But Maya guided him with voice, not hand. She didn't touch the stick once. "You feel that dip? That was fear," she said softly. "Now fight it." By the time they landed, his hands were steady. He didn't smile until his boots touched the ground. Then he grinned so wide Maya could see every white tooth through his helmet visor. "I've never felt like that before," he said. "Like I could matter." "You do," Maya replied. That's what they were afraid of. The next student was Sophie Hahn, a civilian aviation major who had been rejected from 5 military pilot programs because she didn't test well under pressure. Maya put her in a 2-seater glider. No engine, no safety net. "You want to learn pressure?" she asked. "Let gravity teach you." They spent the entire morning above the valley, riding air currents, stalling into wind spirals, trusting silence to reveal skill. By dusk, Sophie landed without a word. Her eyes burned with something new, not defiance, belonging. Inside the main hangar, Amanda began building a wall, not with bricks, but with patches, one from each student, not from a squadron they served, but from the person they became. The wall of the unseen became the heart of the academy, and above it, painted in black across the corrugated tin, was the motto Amanda wrote late one night while Maya was asleep in her bunk. You weren't broken. They just couldn't handle you whole. Back in Washington, an advisor to the Secretary of Defense read the latest Academy report with growing concern. Sir, he said, she's not building a flight school. She's building a movement. The Secretary took off his glasses. Then we better figure out whether we're going to fight it or learn from it. And hundreds of miles away, under a full moon over Montana, Maya stood at the edge of the runway alone. She closed her eyes, not remembering, but imagining. 100 students, a dozen aircraft, lives rewritten, not with signatures, but with lift. 2 months after the Hawthorne Flight Academy opened its rusted gates to its first students, the first true threat arrived, neatly packaged in an official government envelope. United States Air Force, Office of Strategic Oversight, Notice of Facility Audit. Maya read it 3 times. Then again, it wasn't a surprise, but it was earlier than expected. Inside the envelope were 14 pages of bureaucratic language, cloaked as routine compliance inspection, but Maya knew better. This wasn't about safety. It was about fear. Fear that someone outside the system was proving the system didn't work. Amanda sat across from her at the folding table they used as a command desk. Her expression was hard to read, but her voice wasn't. They're coming to shut us down, aren't they? No, Maya said, carefully folding the letter. They're coming to see if we'll flinch. The team prepared. Student files were reviewed, logs updated, aircraft scrubbed and serviced. Maya instructed everyone to answer questions honestly, but say nothing unnecessary. Let the results speak for themselves, she said. The team of inspectors arrived on a cold Monday morning, dressed in starched uniforms and faces polished with authority. The lead agent introduced himself as Colonel Renford Hale, compliance officer with the Office of Tactical Oversight. A tall man, silver at the temples. His handshake was firm but without warmth. This won't take long, he said. But it did. For 3 days, Hale and his team roamed the academy grounds like wolves in a chicken yard. They asked questions that had nothing to do with safety, about Maya's credentials, the students' military histories, flight hours, funding, insurance, psychological profiles. They grilled Amanda for an hour about her relationship with Maya. They pulled Carlos Martinez aside and interrogated him on his political affiliations and any former disciplinary action during service. They questioned Sophie Hahn about her immigration background, citing her application's lack of complete transparency. It became clear this wasn't an audit. It was a search for a reason to kill the idea that someone like Maya, someone they'd buried, could rise again and build something from nothing. But the students didn't break. They had learned from her. On the 4th day, Maya was summoned to the central hangar. Hale waited beside one of the older trainer planes, clipboard in hand, his voice measured. Your students have demonstrated remarkable technical awareness, situational control, and unorthodox response capability. That's not a compliment. Then why say it? Maya asked. Because they're learning how to operate outside the doctrine, outside the discipline. She met his eyes. Maybe the doctrine is the problem. That's not your decision. No, she said. It's theirs. Hale flipped a page. You're in violation of federal standards for military-aligned training programs. You're unauthorized to teach active combat protocols. You've used unauthorized flight simulation software that doesn't meet Department of Defense encryption levels. And I haven't taken a single dollar from your budget, Maya interrupted. I haven't flown a government aircraft or trained a soldier under enlistment contract. You don't control this place. You're just afraid of it. Hale's eyes narrowed. You were court-martialed for recklessness, Major Reeds. That stain doesn't wash away just because a general gave you a hug and a second chance. That stain, she replied evenly, was painted on me by traitors. And the second chance? I didn't take it. I built it. He stepped forward. Be careful, Captain. You're making enemies. Maya didn't flinch. I made worse ones. Some wore ribbons, just like yours. That night, the team gathered in the dining bay, a converted storage shed lit by string lights and space heaters. The mood was quiet. Amanda brought out 2 thermoses of coffee and poured Maya a cup. They'll find a way to come back, Amanda said. I know. They'll say you're not authorized to teach, not licensed, that you're a rogue operator. I know. Then what do we do? Maya stared at the steam rising from the cup. Outside, snow had begun to fall, slow and silent. We keep flying. 3 days later, an envelope arrived from General Monroe's office. Inside were 4 items. A letter of civil aviation training accreditation, fast-tracked through a partnership with the Colorado Aeronautical Institute. A copy of a declassified confession from Colonel Everett Langston, now formally entered into congressional record. A grant award, signed by a private foundation, to fund flight simulators and mental health counseling for student veterans. And a simple note. Truth is slow, but it lands eventually. Keep your engines warm. A.M. Maya folded the papers and looked up at Amanda. We're not just still alive. Amanda grinned. We're cleared for takeoff. Within 2 weeks, applications doubled. One from a single mother who had once flown rotary aircraft before being forced out after pregnancy. Another from a medic-turned-technician diagnosed with PTSD and told he was unfit for active duty, even though he still taught aviation safety better than the instructors who dismissed him. Then came a letter with no return address. Handwritten, barely legible. I was there. Vortex. I knew. I stayed quiet. I'm sorry. If you're still flying, maybe there's hope for people like me too. Maya didn't need a name. Some ghosts were finding their way back home. And in the command offices of Joint Base Andrews, a retired colonel watched Maya's interview on the nightly news and turned off the screen with trembling hands. You should have stayed buried, he muttered to himself. But even as he said it, he knew. She had never buried herself. They had. And now, she was unearthing all of them. 3 months into the Hawthorne Flight Academy's existence, it stopped being just a school. It became a symbol. And symbols, Maya had learned, drew fire. The video expose came from a major national outlet, an investigative piece that ran during primetime news, framed with ominous narration and sensational B-roll. It aired clips from Maya's Falcon flight, overlaying them with headlines like, Disgraced pilot training civilians with military tactics? Unofficial flight school operating outside Air Force oversight. Hero or hazard? The piece featured interviews with anonymous military sources, voices digitally altered, casting doubt on Maya's reinstatement, her authority, and her agenda. She's inspiring resentment, one voice said. Recruits are questioning chain of command because they saw a YouTube video. She's building an anti-institution culture, said another. She's dangerous. The broadcast ended with aerial drone footage of Whitetail Airfield, its snowy runways glowing under floodlights. The camera zoomed in on the Academy's motto, painted across the hangar roof in black. Fly your own course. The anchor's voice dropped low for the closing line. Is this a school or a rebellion? Inside the hangar, Maya watched the segment in silence. Amanda paced, fists clenched. They called it a rebellion. It is, Maya said softly. A quiet one, but a rebellion all the same. Carlos stood in the doorway, stunned. Does this mean they'll come for us again? They never stopped, Maya said. Within 24 hours, the school's main server was hacked. 2 flight simulators crashed mid-session. GPS data vanished from training logs. And the Academy's website, built entirely by volunteers, was replaced by a bright red error screen reading, Unauthorized aerospace training detected. Amanda worked through the night to recover it, eyes bloodshot, fingers flying across the keyboard. They're trying to freeze us out, she muttered. Digitally, financially, structurally. Doesn't matter if they win in court. If they make us look like chaos, we lose credibility. Maya stood beside her. Then we get ahead of the story. She agreed to one interview, not with a major outlet, but with a young female journalist named Layla Park, who had covered military and justice stories for an independent news channel. Layla arrived with a single camera, a portable mic, and eyes that had seen too much to be fooled by polish. They sat at the edge of the runway as wind rolled across the valley. "You built this place for people like you?" Layla asked. "No," Maya said. "I built it for the people they never let become me." Layla leaned forward. "You know the headlines. You know what they're saying. What do you want people to hear directly from you?" Maya stared out across the field, where Sophie Hahn was instructing a younger student in glider navigation. "I want them to stop measuring potential by conformity. I want them to understand that loyalty to truth is not disloyalty to structure. And I want them to know, if you survive being erased, you don't owe your silence to the people who held the pen." The video went live that night. It hit 1 million views in 4 hours and changed everything. Donations flooded in. A veteran support group from Kansas sent $10,000. A flight mechanic school in Alaska sent tools. A military widow from Nevada sent a box of letters from her late husband's squadron with a handwritten note. "They deserve someone like you at the top. Build the place they never had." Then came an unexpected call from the Federal Aviation Administration. They offered to designate the academy as an experimental pilot mentorship facility under a civilian development program. It wasn't a military endorsement, but it was legal protection. It gave them breathing room. Yet not everyone was pleased. 2 days later, a small plane buzzed low over Whitetail at dusk, far below legal altitude. It made 3 hard passes over the main hangar before disappearing north. The next morning, the power grid tripped without warning, disabling radar, comms, and generator backups. Amanda found severed cable, ends buried in snow. Carlos unearthed tire tracks, deliberate, hidden, fast. "Sabotage," he said. "Professional." No one was hurt, but the message was clear. You're not welcome. The students didn't flinch. They trained harder, flew longer hours, adapted to manual protocols, began writing their own training modules. One night, Maya walked into the hangar and found Sophie teaching a course on low-visibility recovery using a flashlight and a hand-drawn map on the wall. "No tech, just instinct. This isn't in the curriculum," Maya said. Sophie didn't look up. "Neither is half the world." Maya smiled. "Carry on." Then, in the midst of the rising storm, came something Maya didn't expect. A letter. Personal. Delivered by hand. She recognized the seal before she even broke it open. United States Senate. Committee on Armed Services. Inside, a single-page request. "Captain Julia Reeds is hereby invited to testify before a closed hearing regarding her court-martial, the findings of the Langston Confession, and the future of command accountability in the United States military." Maya stood motionless for a long time. Amanda walked minutes later, saw the envelope, and froze. "They're calling you back." Maya nodded once. "They want my story. Are you going to give it to them?" Maya looked down at her students' flight logs, smudged with fingerprints and grease, imperfect and brave. "I already did." Then she set the envelope on the desk and started packing her bag. The flight to D.C. was in 48 hours, and the ghosts in that courtroom were waiting. The Senate chamber was colder than Maya remembered. Not by temperature, by design. Everything inside the hearing room was calculated to disarm. Neutral wood tones, stone floors, rows of spotless microphones, and perfectly placed water pitchers. A half-circle of committee members sat elevated on a dais, back straight, pens poised. Their nameplates gleamed beneath television lights. At the center of it all stood the witness table, and a single name placard. Major Julia Reeds, U.S. Air Force, retired. The room was filled but quiet. Media were banned, but the press hovered just beyond the doors. 2 rows behind Maya sat General Alaric Monroe, arms folded, expression unreadable. On the far side sat her legal liaison and a civilian rights advocate. She had declined official representation. She would speak for herself. When the gavel came down, the voice that opened the hearing was clear, crisp, and female. Senator Patricia Langford, Chair of the Armed Services Committee. "This hearing is called to order. The record will reflect that we are convening in a closed session to review the circumstances surrounding the court-martial of then-Captain Julia Reeds, the posthumous confession of Colonel Everett Langston, and the institutional accountability failures that followed." She turned slightly toward Maya. Major reads, "Thank you for appearing today. You may begin your statement." Maya stood slowly. In that moment, the years collapsed around her like scaffolding. Langston's betrayal, Torres's letter, 8 years of anonymity, and the burning, heavy silence of being made to disappear. Her voice, when it came, was measured. "Senator, the record of my career is complicated. So is the record of my downfall. I'm not here to clear my name. That happened the day I decided to stop waiting for permission to speak." A beat of silence. "I was blamed for a mission failure I did not cause. For men died. My name was stripped from every commendation. I disappeared, not because I was afraid, because I knew the system would not protect the truth." Senator Langford leaned forward. "And what changed?" Maya looked her in the eye. "I did." Another senator interjected. Senator Tom Bledsoe, a decorated war veteran himself. "Major, we've reviewed Langston's confession. But that doesn't explain why you vanished from the appeals process. Why not fight back within the system?" "I did," Maya replied calmly. "The system didn't fight for me. It fought to bury me deeper." There was a pause. Then Langford tapped her pen against her notes. "Let's speak plainly. Do you believe the military justice system is broken?" Maya didn't hesitate. "I believe it protects power more efficiently than it protects truth." A murmur moved across the staff section. Langford nodded slowly, almost reluctantly. "And yet, you still built a flight academy. You still train veterans, many of whom were failed by the same institution. Why? Because flight saved me. And the people they tried to forget still deserve to rise." Senator Bledsoe shifted uncomfortably. "There are those who believe your academy undermines the authority of sanctioned training pipelines." Maya straightened her shoulders. Sanctioned authority failed them. I'm not building an alternative to the Air Force. I'm building an alternative to silence. Langford glanced at the clock. "You've made powerful enemies, Major." Maya gave a faint smile. "They've already tried to end me once. They failed. I'm not afraid of their rank." Senator Langford leaned back. "We'll recess for 30 minutes before committee review. Please remain available for further questioning." The gavel fell, and the spell broke. In the hallway, Maya stepped aside as aides and military staff streamed past. Monroe approached, calm as always. "You handled that room better than most generals I know," he said. "I wasn't trying to impress them." "You didn't. You shook them." "Good." Monroe nodded toward the doors. 2 of those senators voted for the defense budget that funded Langston's last overseas assignment. They don't want a martyr. They want this to quietly resolve. Then they invited the wrong person. 30 minutes passed, then 45, then an hour. Maya remained seated at the edge of the hearing room, waiting. At last, the doors reopened. Langford returned with her staff. Her eyes were harder now, but also clearer. "The committee has reviewed the available records, declassified confessions, and your testimony. We are submitting recommendations for judicial reform to the Joint Chiefs of Staff and ordering an independent oversight committee for any future high-level courts-martial." She paused. "And for the record, we owe you an apology." Maya said nothing, because she didn't need an apology. She needed change. And maybe, just maybe, this was the first real step. Outside the Capitol building, the air was colder than Montana. Amanda was waiting at the curb with a rental truck and a thermos of coffee. "How bad was it?" she asked. Maya took the cup. "They asked good questions. They were afraid of the answers." Amanda exhaled. "So what happens now? We go home. Back to Whitetail?" "No," Maya said. "To the sky." 2 days later, she returned to the academy with news. A civilian oversight foundation had pledged long-term funding. The FAA had granted clearance for 3 new aircraft under an education-first doctrine. More instructors were arriving next week, including 2 former test pilots and a retired drone operator. And perhaps most powerful of all, congressional hearings had cited the Hawthorne Flight Academy by name in its written report on institutional bias in flight training. Whitetail was no longer a fringe project. It was a movement with teeth, and the ones who tried to erase her had just added her name to the record books. But Maya wasn't done, because some truths needed more than restoration. They needed legacy. So she gathered her students beneath the wind-battered hangar that night and made them a promise. This isn't about me. My story's just the door. You're the reason this place exists. You're the wind it flies on. And as dusk settled over the academy, a familiar sound rose from the south, a distant buzz of engines. 3 aircraft appeared on the horizon, pilots from another base, requesting permission to train. Not because they had to, but because they chose to. And in that moment, Maya realized the institution hadn't just failed. It had lost its monopoly, and something new had taken flight. Spring came late to Whitetail. The snow melted slow, giving way to dry earth and patches of wild grass. Pine trees unfurled cautious green tips, and the sun returned like an old friend, warmer, slower, more honest. The hangar doors stayed open longer now. Inside, the academy hummed with motion. Sophie Hahn was overseeing her first solo flight instruction, her voice steady in the comms. Carlos had turned part of the maintenance bay into a propulsion design lab. Amanda managed the new scheduling office with 2 cadets at her side and a giant whiteboard filled with names, rotations, and a single word at the top. Earned. Maya watched it all unfold from the flight tower, headphones around her neck, clipboard half filled with checklists. But most of the time, she didn't need them anymore. She could hear the rhythm of the place in her bones. The clatter of landing gear, the rise of engines, the cadence of student voices reciting call signs with nervous pride. This wasn't a place anymore. It was a heartbeat. One evening, she took the long walk past the ridge line behind the field. The trail curved through pines, cutting to the west where the last of the sunset could still be caught. She reached a small clearing, bare except for a granite plaque mounted on a metal stake. She ran her fingers over the names etched there. Torres, Michaels, Dean, Kaplan. Pilots. Fallen. Unforgotten. And below them, the words, "We fly for those who fell." Maya crouched slowly and placed something at the base. A folded flight patch, tattered at the edges, sun-faded, worn thin. Her old squadron insignia. She whispered, "You were right, Torres. They can't erase us if we keep building." The wind picked up gently, bending the grass. She stayed until the stars came out. The following week brought a letter, hand-delivered again. This one had no official seal. It was from a young woman in Kansas. She'd seen Maya's interview. She'd lost a brother in the same overseas campaign Langston had commanded. The letter didn't ask for justice. It asked for a chance. "I never flew anything," the girl wrote, "but I think about him every time I look up. I want to feel what he felt, even for one moment. Will you teach me?" Maya added her name to the list. No questions, no labels, just a new file folder in the cabinet marked Candidates, 2026. Then came a call from the Smithsonian Air and Space Museum. They wanted to host a public panel on forgotten pilots and the price of silence. They asked Maya to be the keynote speaker. She declined, then mailed them something instead. A worn pair of flight gloves, and a single sentence on the note tucked inside. Put this next to the names they never said out loud. By midsummer, the academy had over 50 students. A new hangar was under construction, and one of the original Falcon prototypes, retired and restructured, was now a teaching vessel, stripped of weapons and wired for learning. They named it Echo One, not after a mission, after a principle. Every voice deserves to echo. Maya resumed flying more often, not for show, not for revenge, but for herself. Each takeoff was quieter than the last, each landing smoother, and every time the wheels touched down, she felt less haunted and more healed. One evening, she invited her senior students to a final night flight before graduation. The moon was low, casting silver ribbons across the valley. The planes lifted one by one, forming a loose diamond over the canyon ridge, their lights blinking in practiced rhythm. Maya flew lead, Sophie on her right, Carlos behind, Amanda, last in line, co-pilot, for once, instead of mission command. Above them stretched the sky that had once exiled Maya Reeds. Now it welcomed her home. She keyed her mic, voice low and steady. To all call signs, welcome to the sky you choose. Not the one you're given. Let's make it count. One by one, the voices came back. Copy that. Affirmative, lead. Ready to write our chapter. And they flew. Not as soldiers, not as survivors, but as something harder to define, and more lasting. They flew as legacy, as proof, as the story no one could erase.